Good morning, everyone. At least good morning for those that are in the US. Good evening for you guys in India or anywhere else across the world. Welcome to QA Touch virtual series. So today we have a great one today with Tom Cagley from Tom Cagley and Associates, and Prashant Hegde, QA lead from MoEngage. So thank you guys so much for coming in. And my name is Tim Deep. And let me put it to the next screen. Welcome to the virtual series. So my name is Tim Deep. I'm the customer success manager for DCCAP. I've been hosting a lot of different events for the company DCCAP. If you guys don't know, DCCAP is the parent company of QA Touch. So QA Touch is one of the products that we have, and it's very great to be engaging with all you guys and in the community to really build up QA practices across the board. So yeah. Just want to do some housekeeping, just make sure that you guys are on board. I see some more attendees coming in right now. If you look at the very bottom, we have a poll, so feel free to fill out that poll whenever you can. With the webinar series, you guys don't actually have you won't be able to share your video and your audio. But if you do want to contact us and you do want to chat, there's a chat box on the bottom. You could chat with the whole group. And then you can also ask a question out there. So, when each of the speakers are having their presentation, you can go ahead and submit a question, and then I'll be the moderator. I'll make sure that Tom and Prashant, they know that there's a question submitted, okay? So that's pretty much it in terms of the housekeeping. For tomorrow, we actually have another session that we're very excited for. It's called DCCAP E-Sessions with Moody Price. Moody Price is one of our clients that just went live on their Magento 2 website. So doing a lot with integrations with the ERP system, Epicor P21. And that's another community that we're also building up. And you guys are more than welcome to come and hang out with us. It's only about an hour and a half session starting from 11 a.m. tomorrow Eastern time. So if you want to register, just go ahead and go to dccap.com/e-sessions. So yeah, right now I'd like to bring up Tom Cagley. So Tom Cagley is an agile and lean coach, author, blogger, podcaster, tester, coder, and a family guy who helps individuals, teams, and organizations deliver more value effectively. So he's done a lot, has contributed a lot into the QA community, and look forward to a great series from him. So he's going to be talking about how to set smart goals for testers. Tom Cagley, go ahead and take the stage.
All right, thank you. So let's just dive. Well, let's not even dive in. Let's start with a little poll myself. So if you have access to the internet, either from your phone or your laptop, whatever you're watching on, go to www.menti.com and type in the code 24747. I'm asking two questions. It's not going to ask for your email or any of that other stuff. That's not the point. I'd like to get a sense as to, since we're going to talk about goals a little bit, how many goals you have. And well, I'll hold off on the second question until we get a few people answer it. So if you can rush over there for a second and see if you can answer that. How many goals do you have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 1,000. I don't know what 1,000 would be like. Or do you have none? What's the answer? Let's see if a couple of people will actually play. So far, no one wants to go over there and commit to the number of goals that you have. Oh, we have our first person jumping in. And 5. Excellent. That's one. Ooh. I'm going to shrink 2. Come on, one more at least. Break the tie. Yeah. So here's, okay, 4. So here's the interesting part, right? Is that with 4 is piling up. So more than 1, less than 1,000, or at least less than 5 for the 4 people that have actually voted on this. So feel free to think about it and throw that in. I will generate this off as a PDF and send it over to Tim afterwards and let, 6 to 10. Ouch. We'll explore why large numbers are probably not very good a little later. So let's go to the next question just for a second. You can do that by tabbing over. And this is sort of a word cloud kind of thing. As a tester, what are your current top 3 goals? So obviously, if it's a nice SMART goal and it has 42,000 words, I don't worry about that. What is sort of the gist of it? Improve quality. Test case management flow. So let's throw a few in there. What are your top 3, current top 3? And think about that for a second, because current top 3 probably aren't the same as your current top 3 were a couple of months ago. It's interesting. I was talking to a group Friday, and we were discussing the impact, or what we perceived the impact of COVID-19 was on things going forward. Out of the box test cases, test management, innovate, automation. Yeah, those are good goals. Hopefully, when you think about those 6 to 10, for the person who's 6 to 10, hopefully there's some degree of relationship with them. But let's leave this for now. It will be here until the end, so feel free to sneak off and go to www.menti.com 24/7 and add your information in there. I'm going to get to the 15,000 slide presentation. I want to make sure that we're sharing that. So let's make sure that we're sharing that. Okay, so how to set SMART-ish. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that all goals should be SMART for testers. And as Tim told you, I have been a tester multiple times in my career. I've managed test lead groups. My largest program that I worked on was bank mergers as the quality assurance lead, and during the late 1990s, early 2000s here in the States. But I always got anxious when people said it was quality assurance, because very frankly, as a whole bunch of testers, all we could do is try to catch all of the defects that the developers and the configurers and the people doing the other parts of the work were injecting in there, because we most certainly weren't. Okay, so let's start with thinking about, of those goals. Remember when we were talking through that wonderful poll of the number of goals that you have, there was some with a few and a few with a large number. Where'd those come from? And in a lot of cases, it's the goals are, I would say, inflicted might be a great way to think about it, but they're pushed down from somewhere else. They're your bosses. So consider goals that crop up and decide really whose goals are they anyway. Bosses, they can insist that an activity be done or not done. They can talk about the success, those sorts of things, and influence you. There are all sorts of cognitive biases that influence human behavior. Requiring your goals to be built from theirs is one of my favorites, and at one point leading lots and lots and lots of people, that was the way I made darn sure that I inflicted my goals on them. It actually sounds bad now, but how do we do that? How do we make these ours? How do we set goals that are our goals, not necessarily somebody else? So things like introspection, answering what you want to do for yourself. So goals, whether you're a tester, a coder, anything like that, some of them are going to be work related. Even if they're work related, they have to have something of you in them. So it's important to really if you find yourself thinking that that's just the way it is, you have to force yourself to question those assumptions. So typically, organizational goals cascade. Recently, I worked for a firm called Highland Software in Westlake, Ohio, here in the States, and a great firm. Loved it, and we got to goal setting at the end of the year, and we went through a process of OKRs, but we were to think up our own goals. And part of that rubbed me the wrong way because I didn't know whether or not I was serving, the leaders of the firm. It didn't cascade down very well. So I think goals do have to cascade from organizational department, project, and then influence personal goals. So all of these things have to start getting weighed in. Now, targeting goals for testers, I think one of the things that I think people have to remember is that unless you're in an organization that truly is just doing outsourced testing, that's the product that you're selling, that in reality, most of us live within a larger ecosystem, and that we have to respect or at least understand what the true value stream is. So on the screen here is Porter's value stream model. And while this is very macro, it's an easy thing to look at and say, okay, where does what I do influence the flow? And we'll hear from Prashant later on, who also has an agile bend to his piece. And very frankly, I think what we'll all hear is that outputs across that value stream are important. Individual doing things, individual tasks, and measuring those kind of goals, might be important in some circumstances, but in reality, we need to think about the broader perspective and the teams that transverse that. So I think there are 4 basic metrics, and having lived in the measurement world, I'm using that term very advisedly, metric being a group of measures that are then used to calculate something. Things like throughput, how much work gets done. Cycle time, how fast things move through. Productivity, and I'll go old school on you there and talk about how much work gets created per unit of effort. And that's, the definition of labor productivity. And delivered defects, what comes out of the entirety of the process. Any individual step, and having lived in the CMMI world, I'm a TMMI assessor, all of these individual steps, looking at defects that transverse those, what's the goal is to find them. We don't want to incent people not to find them along the way. Therefore, I'm looking at delivered defects in this conversation at the end of the individual, as the output actually gets delivered. So those are considerations to think through in terms of tailoring, deriving your own goals, or actually creating goals from somewhere else. So 4 basic measurement areas, but here's the problem, right? And I have been active in the Agile movement for a very long time at this point. So I feel that if you look at the Agile Manifesto, if you look at Scrum, it's an empirical process. It uses your senses, eyes, ears, things that we can look at and sense in terms of doing things like gathering information. We use the term inspect and adapt often in the Agile community. But the reality is just using your eyes isn't always a good idea because it can tell you all sorts of different things. For those of you who are interested in why pure empiricism doesn't work in what we do, I would refer you to actually go take a look at the funnel experiment from W. Edwards Deming. And in reality, Deming would suggest that reacting to every bit of input, inspecting, adapting everything, is a form of tampering. Tampering ends up causing irrational and erratic results. I have a couple of good URLs that I can point you to, so if you need those, put those in the chat window. I will, after I'm done here, I will forward them to you. But rationalism is also required. We have to understand the mathematical and logical theory behind things so that we can actually determine whether or not we should react to any individual problem or group of problems. So a combination of rationalism and empiricism, I think, is really critical for goal setting and then understanding the results of goals. So if you noticed, I modified the title just a little bit and I put smart-ish. I'm actually going to suggest that every one of you have a BHAG. And that's but Tom, where did that come from? A big, hairy, audacious goal. And a BHAG really is that North Star. It's that thing that you drive to. It's going to be extremely difficult to actually get all the way there. But it's that big guiding sort of principle and goal in what you do. I have a BHAG that I get up in the morning and contemplate every day. And that is to actually reach 100,000 listeners on my podcast in a month. Well, I'm nowhere near there, but I'm always continually modifying and looking at my goals through that perspective. It acts as my North Star to guide me. So I think you have to have something along those kinds of lines, whether it's personal, whether it's something else. I want to be the richest person in the whole world, so be it. SMART goals, I think probably all of us have been exposed to SMART goals before. There are a number of variations. There's PATSY, which is another way of getting at the same basic constructs, but SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-bound. I mean, probably put it on your notebook so that you have it at all times, right? It has to be defined, specific, measurable. Can it be tracked? Can it be qualified? And that gets us back into that whole empirical, rational kinds of discussion. Attainable. SMART goal really does need to be attainable. A BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, doesn't have to be because it's actually more aspirational. Realistic, worth pursuing, and time-bound. You're going to do it in a certain period of time. So there are a couple of things, and having wrestled with SMART goals many times because, very frankly, I look at all goals as an opportunity, or at least time as an opportunity to reevaluate all goals. I'd say when you start writing your SMART goals, you get rid of all shoulds and replace them with wills. Should is much more, loosey, a kind of thing. It means that you can or can't change soon to a specific timeline, right? If we go back, and I apologize, I'm not good with straight lines. If you say soon, it's not time bound. Or if you said within the next couple of quarters, again, not time bound kind of thing. Switch need to want to. This is about you. This is about something that you're going to spend time and effort to do. I would never write a SMART goal with the word quit in it. Too darn negative. And again, recognize that part of having goals is to send yourself messages. One of the things that I suggest when I'm coaching is that you set, sort of a partner so that you can bounce those off and talk about whether or not you're attaining. Doesn't necessarily have to be a coach, but it needs to be someone else who can hold and be your accountability buddy. And it's easier to talk about stop versus, quit, which is more negative. And change never to a specific action. Never is one of those things that we all like to think. I am never going to eat Fritos, which is a high fat corn chip, again in my life. Well, yeah, never until the next time I drive by a grocery store that has Fritos in it. All right, so here are some examples of a bad goal, right? I want to make more time each morning to work on my most important task. By the way, the whole idea of an MIT, most important task, is a pretty critical sort of guiding scenario. A gentleman and author that I highly recommend reading, Kevin Cruz, talks about the most important task as being that, again, part of that whole using goals as a guiding principle kind of thing. And so that's the one you make sure that you focus on, the most important task, that most important goal during those hours that you're freshest. I am a morning person. Regardless of where I am in the world, and I've traveled quite a few places. As a matter of fact, as I was running this morning, I was toting it up. Other than obviously, living in the United States, I've been there the most. The second most I've been to is Canada, obviously very close, right across the border. And the third is India. And I toted up, and I may have missed a few. I've been to India 16 different times. So again, very different time zone, but I get up at 4 a.m. every day, other than maybe Saturdays, and I work on my most important task at that point in time. I want to spend, something that's unclear, right? I want to spend 2 hours each morning working on my most important task versus something I'm currently working on. Every day this week, I'll work on my website from a specific time without interruption. Without interruption means I have to turn off my phone. I have to turn off my webcam. I have to turn off all of those kinds of things. Again, SMART goals, go back a little bit, need to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And again, if we think about testing, we need to focus on things like throughput, cycle time, delivery of defects, those sorts of things. If we're on a team, a whole team that's actually taking things from a story all the way to done, and done means potentially shippable, then very frankly, we need to make sure that we're focusing on those right output metrics. All right, so here are some systematic problems with goals and goal setting. And as you get into individual silos, I think these become significantly harder to deal with. Too many goals. I'm hard pressed, the person who's doing between 5 and 10, have 5 and 10 current goals kind of thing. Perhaps they're staged out. But if you just think about this in a lean sense, how can you have 5 items, work in process? Think about that as a whip, and whether or not you need to limit your work in process. Having things that are too narrow of a focus so that you might attain that goal, but you won't end up reaching that bigger goal, or you might not have the impact that you think. Poorly estimated goals. Let's face it, all of us are probably not the world's greatest estimators. And I don't mean that as a negative. I worked in estimation. I worked for Capers Jones for a while. I coded and tested estimation scenarios, did the math work behind it. So, but very frankly, if I was a really great estimator, I would probably be a millionaire and probably wouldn't be doing this. Or I would, but I'd be having more fun doing it, right? So poorly estimated goals are our bane, right? We look at those, we say we're going to accomplish them, and then we recognize that we can't get there from here, and then it becomes a demotivator. Viewing goals as static. Goals are not static. We have to reevaluate that. So think about applying that whole agile construct of iterations, or at least some form of time boundedness, so that you can reevaluate the goals if the world changes, if what your boss needs, what your organization needs, what your team needs changes, you change the goal. Because attaining a goal that doesn't make any sense anymore, it may feel good briefly to check that off the list, kind of thing. We all like checking things off the list, but it isn't going to benefit the organization in a big way. Inflicted goals. These last two are pretty ugly, kind of thing. I will tell you what your goals are. Please write them down and put them in your management directives or your OKRs, those sorts of things. Nobody commits them. You inflict goals on somebody else. I was having a conversation with one of my daughters last night, and listening to her lament, because we were walking through this presentation, listening to her lament some of the mistakes I made when I inflicted goals on her. Avoid those. It is not a motivator. And weaponizing goals is a mechanism, especially for leaders, who make sure that people are getting goals that they can't attain, so that they can teach them a lesson, get them to learn something. That's weaponizing goals. It isn't motivating. Nobody learns from them. So avoid any one of these systemic kind of things when you're setting them, or when someone is setting them for you or to you. A quick list of ideas for a checklist, and I'm a big fan of simple checklists to help guide things. Again, think of it as a framework. So start by considering one big, hairy, audacious goal. And I suggest only one of those, because if you had two, and even if they were somewhat similar, how do you aspire to two things at once? And I think that just ends up causing more trouble than it's worth. Write, all tactical, non-BHAG goals. And big, hairy, audacious goals are probably not going to be SMART using that SMART framework. Again, there are other things in SMART, but SMART's the one that I think is pretty easy and to contemplate. Construct goals so they motivate you to higher performance. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, I set my annual goals, and it was back when I was in the banking industry, and I set my goals so that I would attain them, and it just they were simply a cakewalk. I made them probably in annual goals somewhere in April or May, and then then could actually just pile it on afterwards. It didn't do much for my motivation. Matter of fact, I got so undermotivated that I ended up leaving the job. Now, that was positive because I went to work for Capers up in Boston, but it isn't a motivation. Goals need to push you to be better, to continuously improve. Develop so that they feed your sense of accomplishment and self-confidence. Why do you set goals? Now again, if we go back to our systemic goals and they're inflicted on you, then they're not going to be a significant motivator. So it's going to be hard. But again, if you're if you have input or you're constructing, even if they're inferred down or inflicted down, you can change them so that they drive you to be, higher degree of improvement kinds of things. Prioritize your goals. If you have, and back to our mentee number, if we have 5 to 10 goals, all of them can't be number one. If even 2 goals are your number one goal, what do you have? You have 2 that are number 2, and they're both tied for number 2. How do you split your time? Human beings, and I hope this doesn't come as a shock to anyone, human beings do not multitask. We fast switch, perhaps, and there might be data that suggests that women are a little bit better at fast switching than men, but we don't multitask. Heck, I can barely walk and talk on my cell phone. By the way, there's a word for that. They're called swambies. And in places there, people are making that illegal because you can't do it well without getting run over by a car. And having walked along the streets in Bengaluru and other places, I most certainly wouldn't want to be a swambi in India. Prioritize your goals, pick the one, work on it. If you get it done, then you go to the next one. State your goals in a positive fashion. It goes back to the idea, don't say quit. Use language that is motivating. Negative language is not a motivator for anyone. Set your goals in a clear and level head. So making goals, people tend to do this right at the end of the year, right before New Year's, you set goals. I have friends that I'm working with that are about to go through a semi-annual goal setting. And it's like, well, it's the 6 months of the year. Make sure that you're doing this and thinking through it. The classic one here in the States is that at the end of every year, people make, resolutions, which are goals, right? And they're not really the same as we're talking about in terms of a work scenario, but they can be, right? I'm going to lose 100 pounds. I'm going to get in the best shape of my life. And generally they say New Year's resolutions are over by mid-February, and that may or may not have moved around. Or we have something like the COVID lockdown that just disrupts everything. Remember, these things can't be static, and you need to adjust, and you need to think through it in a level head. Plan specific points in time for retrospective and replanning. Have an accountability buddy. Use people, use your friends, use your peers, if you have a community of trust to draw from, to actually have conversations and hold each other accountable. More goals are made if there's a way to lean over, and ask for help, and that's sort of that idea from Agile. But at the same time, because you're a community, because you're a true team, having accountability buddies, somebody's going to say, "Hey, that was the same excuse you used last time. Let's explore that a little bit. Let's make sure that we're moving in the right direction." So a simple goals kind of checklist. Another checklist for process improvement goals, which is slightly different. The thing I would like to point out on this one to actually hopefully make that more valuable to you is, I remember that before you make a process change, if your goals for a process change, create a benchmark, baseline. Get that line in the sand so that you can actually get and leverage a SMART goal. If you haven't measured where you've started from, having a SMART goal and just saying, well, I'm trending in the right direction, I think is, I don't think that is as valuable as doing it from the point of view of having a benchmark and knowing that you've actually made your change, and obviously report those. So in a nutshell, SMART goals, great idea, but don't all, have one that's that guiding principle, that BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal, so that all of your goals drive there. That BHAG, if you're in a corporate environment, can be yours, right? It's that thing that you're driving for. I want to be the lead test architect in 3 years. That's your big, hairy, audacious goal. You can then reinterpret all of those individual goals, some of which may be inflicted down on you, in a manner that allows you to pursue your North Star so that you can then drive forward. Again, 4 basic measures that I think are really important, whether, especially if you're working in a lean, agile scenario where you are on teams, especially fully cross-functional teams. Focus on throughput, focus on cycle time, focus on productivity. And, people may throw rocks at you, but the productivity thing, but you still have to be effective and efficient, especially with your budget that you're working through. And then finally, on the number of defects that you're actually delivering. You want to get them out. You don't want to set goals, SMART goals or not, that say, I'm going to find 500 defects. What if, God forbid, that suddenly coders actually don't create those for you? You're going to find things that don't exist? Doesn't matter. So SMART goals, great idea. Testers really need to focus on that whole value stream. So, questions?
That was a great presentation, Tom. As of right now, we have no questions. So right now, I'm just going to open it up and for you guys to submit any questions via the Q&A button. And yeah, Tom, that was a great presentation, actually. I loved it. I love how you're incorporating personal development and just for us to improve in our life cycle and everything. So, I'm a big, I love personal development. I actually led some groups with my church on just improving different aspects. One thing I talk about is the RPMS. So R is the relationships, improving on relationships. P is the physical side of things. M is the mentality, and the S is spiritual. So that's really great. And I guess one question I have for you is, you said that you wake up at 4 o'clock every morning. Is that something that you were always like that, just naturally, or you actually had to build a habit of waking up at 4 in the morning?
Well, I probably did have to. Once upon a time, I probably was a night person, but back in university, I worked as a radio disc jockey to put myself through school. And so I would get up at 2 in the morning then, drink several bottles of Coca-Cola, big bottles, and smoke a couple of packs of cigarettes, and then go on the air. So yeah, it became a bad habit to get up at that time. Now I get some writing done, I get some audio editing done, I get some talk with friends, and then I go out and run 7 miles.
Wow, that's great. You do that every day?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I follow The Rock, so Dwayne Johnson, and also what's his name? They wake up at 4 o'clock every day. So Jocko Willink, you know him?
No.
Every morning. So I got him. I started to listen to him, via the Joe Rogan podcast. So
Oh, cool.
Yeah, with Jocko, he literally every morning, kind of to keep himself accountable, was to take a picture of his watch. So this morning it showed 4:32, but he does that every day and kind of shows the aftermath of his workout. So all the sweat that drips on the floor and everything. So just putting that on social media, that puts him accountable. So I love how you talk about it.
Absolutely. That is the accountability thing. So he's in essence made social media his accountability buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
when we do goals, right, to actually help us or motivate us to actually attain them, that accountability thing, I think, is pretty darn important, because you could rationalize to yourself, right, but you can't necessarily rationalize to your team members.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. That's great. And if you have any tips for people to even build up these habits, that'd be great too. So for sure, we're going to be sharing this video afterwards. So we do have a question from the QA Touch team. So they said, thank you for the
cool.
great presentation. Can you please share some tips to include smarter goals into our OKRs?
OKRs, yeah. So I think what you have to do if you're using the OKR construct is to actually step back and make some tailors to the process, so that as you break down, okay, almost like the OKR in its own right is almost a big, hairy, audacious goal, because by definition an OKR is going to push you and potentially be non-attainable, which always drove me a little crazy. So looking down into those next steps, right, there is no reason why you can't look at any individual contributing piece to the OKR, the higher level OKR, as a SMART goal and write it that way.
That's great. So it looks like there's no other further questions. So you guys feel free to still submit questions to Tom. Oh, actually, one just came in, Madurgia. Actually, two. Let's see. Hey, Tom, excellent presentation. I had one question. How can QA people present their bug in an efficient manner such that the product team or any other senior authority will be willing to prioritize such defects and bugs? Any tips on that?
Yes. So the simplest mechanism to do that is to make sure that when you are making that presentation, that you've spent some time up front with the product folk, so that they can, in essence, be the mouthpiece of value. Having spent a lot of time testing, the reality is not all bugs are equal, right? So some of them aren't as valuable as others, and at times, as a technician, things that I think are very important may or may not be important to my product owner or product management, depending on the construct that you're using. Having that conversation up front, or doing it in pairing kind of scenario, I think is a really good mechanism. I work with a team that does mostly mobbing, and because the product owner is part of what's going on when something is discovered, and the decision is made right then and there in terms of prioritization and valuing. So that then can be fed back into the product and the iteration backlog.
That's great. Thank you. One more from Ranjani. And then, after this, if you guys have any questions, still submit them, and then we can have Tom answer them via chat. So we have one from Ranjani. So focus is more important. Let me close this. Focus is more important in QA. How to be more focused when testing multiple deliverables. And another question. And yeah, so let's just answer that. And then from Tom, you can answer the next one due to time constraints. You can answer the next one via chat from Ray.
Super. The first one, work in process. So control your work entry so that you're doing one thing at a time. That will allow you to generate focus. If again, that's a simplistic answer, but that's the hard part, that you have to engineer your process so that you only pull things into what you're into what you're testing when you have the opportunity to actually work on it, get it done. Then you can pull the next one in. So that's the best scenario. The other thing is, chop it up and do it in Pomodoros, 25-minute segments with 5 minutes in between. Pomodoro, by the way, highly recommend as a focusing technique. One of my favorites.
That's great. Thank you so much, Tom. And yeah, you guys keep the questions rolling in, so Tom will be able to moderate them and answer them via chat on the Q&A button and on the chat. So thank you so much, Tom. That was such
when I'm not taking notes from Prashant's presentation.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
And just like I said, so DCCAP, we're the parent company. We're a software development, a digital agency, working a lot with e-commerce. But these are the 4 products that we've we've kind of created for the ecosystem, just to make sure that it's, you know, these tools for the community to do better work for the website. So we have Productimize. It's a product configurator, very, very big with B2C, and just being able to customize T-shirts and any type of products, really, high SKUs and a lot of different configurables. We have Chloris. That's one of our flagship products for ERP integration. So we do a lot. So in our session tomorrow with Moody Price, they're going to be showcasing their Magento 2 website that was on the Commerce Edition, so the Enterprise Edition, and that was with integration with ERP. So that's one of the big headaches that a lot of these distributors are working with. So we created a tool for that, and we also have FlexiPIM, so a product information management system, and then QA Touch. That's the last product that we have. So with QA Touch, we have our community here, and it's great to just really socialize and talk with you all in terms of best practices and how can we achieve better results with QA. So right now I'd like to bring up Prashant Hegde. So he's going to be talking about heuristics and mnemonics in software testing. A little bit about Prashant. He's a very passionate tester and an agile enthusiast. Prashant has led test teams to success in many organizations by improving the quality of their products and optimizing their testing processes. Prashant has presented in several international conferences. He enjoys blogging and has authored articles for software testing magazines. Prashant has helped thousands of ISTQB aspirants to clear their certifications with his free app. So his app is called ISTQB Test Mentor. He was also recognized as a Product Enthusiast of the Year in 2019 by the QA Touch community for his contributions to the community. Right now, he currently heads the QA Touch or the QA team at MoEngage, a leading customer engagement platform based in Bangalore, India. So right now, I'd like to welcome Prashant Hegde.
Thank you so much, Tim, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my presentation, Heuristics and Mnemonics in Software Testing. My name is Prashant Hegde. Today, I'm going to talk about a very interesting topic. It's about heuristics. It basically talks about how our minds work. I hope you will enjoy this webinar. Let's get started. In our day-to-day lives, we make thousands of decisions, hundreds of choices. But if you observe deeply, some of the decisions are done almost automatically with very little effort. And in contrast, some of the other decisions are made slowly and with deep thinking. Why is that? Our brain is one of the most amazing organs, and it's one of the most complex structures in the entire universe. If you have to master your thinking, you need to first understand how your mind works. Our mind basically has two primary systems of thinking. System 1, which thinks fast, and System 2, which thinks slow. System 1 is our default system, and it almost operates automatically. When you use System 1, you do not rely on facts, but you rely on intuition, your emotions, and faith. The best part about System 1 is when you use System 1, it takes very little effort to come to a conclusion or decision. System 2 is thinking slow. When you use System 2, your thinking is rational, slow, deliberate, and it takes a lot of effort to use System 2 to come to a conclusion or decision. When there is a problem, right, our System 1 analyzes if it can solve it on its own, and if it feels it cannot solve it on its own, it asks System 2 to take over, and System 2 solves the problem for us. But we end up making mistakes in our decision making if our System 1 gets deceived by a problem and it feels that it can solve its problem on its own without calling for System 2. So in order to make sure that we make effective decisions, we need to know when to use System 1 and when to use System 2. So you might ask me, if System 1 can make errors in decisions, why do we even need them? Just think about it. If you had to think deliberately about thousands of choices that you make on a day-to-day basis, life would be really exhaustive, right? And our brains are programmed in such a way that we naturally prefer solutions that require minimal mental effort. So that's why system 1 is really important. So this process of using system 1 to make quick decisions is what we call as heuristics. Heuristics are nothing but they are mental shortcuts or a rule of thumb or even an educated guess to solve a problem. Heuristics are fallible ways of solving a problem. A heuristic may work or may not work. Heuristics is not about finding the perfect solution. It's all about making a quick decision which is satisfactory in nature. And our heuristics come from our previous experiences with similar problems. Let's talk about some examples. Let's say you have a really tight jar in your kitchen. What do? Right? You use your jar opening heuristics. You may use a towel to establish a better grip, basically a trial and error method, right? Or you might use a spoon to loosen the lid of the jar. Or you might use your previous experience. You might ask someone to open it for you. Last time when the same problem happened, let's assume that your father helped you to open this jar for you. So you ask your father to open it for you. All this may work or may not work, but these are some of the things that are worth trying to solve a problem. Similarly, when you go to a restaurant and you're handed over a menu which has thousands of dishes, instead of deliberating over each and every choice, you just opt something that you have enjoyed in the past. Or when you go to a supermarket and you want to buy some fruits, what do? I and you will have different set of heuristics to solve the same problem. I may use my own set of heuristics to pick fruits, and you will use your own set of heuristics, right? So these are what heuristics are. Now that we understand a bit about heuristics, let's quickly try to apply them on software testing. Okay, most of us might have consciously or subconsciously noticed this, that when you have a new member in your team or a new QA in your team, you might have observed that that person is able to spot some of the issues that the existing members are blind of. Why does that happen? Basically, when as a QA, you get too familiar with your product, it becomes really dangerous. You might start becoming, ignorant to some of the important details, right? Your testing may start getting narrower. That's why when there is a new person, you can see that that person is able to spot those issues which you are not. So how do you use this heuristic is basically, whenever there is a new joinee in your team, pair up with him and, record the way he tests the software, right? Record the hiccups that he has when he is using the software. Record the frustrations that he has, right? You will end up finding so many usability issues. Also, it's worth to have, bug bashes or, pair testing once in a while when, you are testing your product so that you have different perspectives on your product that you're testing. The next one is called as Pareto's 80-20 rule of thumb, which says that 80% of the effect happens because of 20% of the causes. In software testing, we can relate this to the defect clustering. Defect clustering basically says 80% of the issues happen because of the 20% of the modules. In software testing, as a QA leader, how I apply this is, let's say we have too many production issues. So I target those 20% of the modules, those hotspots which are responsible for most of the bugs. And I try to have initiatives to reduce bugs in those areas, right? This is what is called as Pareto's 80-20 rule. The next one is very interesting. It's called as Occam's razor. Basically, when you're given two hypotheses which explain something equally well, choose a hypothesis which is simpler and makes less assumptions. Basically, Occam's razor says that the simplest solution is often the right solution. Occam's razor favors simplicity over complexity. It's about having simple code, right? Simple code is not something that is easy to write. Having simple test cases, simple automated tests, simple tech documents, simple API documents, right? This can be related to the KISS principle in modern development or testing, in modern development or testing. How to apply this in software testing? Let's assume that there is an automated test that failed for me. So instead of looking at a more complex cause first, I start with the most simple cause that might have caused the issue. It can be also used in finding root causes and stuff like that. So this is very interesting. So even detectives and doctors use this. Detectives use this to find suspects in their crime cases. Doctors use this to shorten their span of diagnosis. So this is very interesting. I would recommend everybody to do some more reading on tokens raised. Now I want to talk about a popular heuristic called Goldilocks, too big, too small, and just right, which is shared by Elizabeth Hendrickson in her book Explore It. First question, why should you know others' heuristics? As I told you earlier, everyone has their own set of heuristics, and when you understand others' heuristic, it will help you to be a better tester. I might have my own approach of software testing, and with that approach, I will be able to find a similar kind of bugs. But when I understand how you test, right, it actually helps me to broaden my horizon. It helps me to add variety to my own approach of software testing. So that's why you need to understand how others test, and you need to understand heuristics, shared by other testers. So Goldilocks talks about, adding a too big input, a too small input, and a just right input wherever there is a range of values involved. Let's look at a practical example. Let's assume that you're testing this very trivial application which calculates if a given input is a palindrome. Palindrome is basically a number or a word which reads same forward and backward. And let's try to apply Goldilocks on this simple application. So I will start with a just right input. What could be a just right input? Something that is positive and is within the boundaries 1 to 1, and it looks to work perfectly fine for this input. Let's try one more just right input. Even this seems to work fine. Now let's try a too small input. What can be too small for a palindrome? A single character? Even this looks fine. What if I add a special character? Even that seems to work fine. What if I do not add anything, an empty input? That's the smallest thing that you can enter. As you can see, there is a bug when you do not give any input. There is a validation missing in place. What if I add an emoji, which is again a too small input? As you can see, this also looks like a bug. This is not something I expected. Also the name, also the spelling of reversed is wrong. We already found 2 bugs with too small. Let's try a too big input. When I enter this long string and click on submit, the UI basically breaks. The point I want to make here is, just by using this small heuristic, I was able to find 3-4 issues quickly. When you're working in an agile environment, you never have enough time to test. You work in a highly compressed test execution cycles. And as we all know, that exhaustive testing is impossible. And when you run out of test ideas, when you run out of inspiration, basically heuristics guide you your next step, right? By using smart heuristics like this, you'll be able to maximize your test coverage with minimal effort. That's why you need to understand others' heuristics. And also you need to understand and develop your own heuristics. I'll give you an example for one of my own heuristics that I use. Recently, I was very interested in learning more about cross-site scripting, which is called as XSS. Basically, XSS is a security issue which will let you get sensitive information of the users like cookies or even their credentials. Or you might also deface the entire website. You might spoof the contents of the website to mislead the user. This is considered as a very serious security issue. So based on my experience, I started using a simple HTML italic tag as a heuristic to find XSS issues. So let's try the same on this application. So I entered my name in between the HTML tags, HTML italic tags. Basically, when I click on submit, my name should not turn to italic. If my name turns to italic, it means that the application is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. Okay, now my name turned to italic. How does this even matter? You might ask, this very small thing. But if I ingest a more serious script, I'll be able to deface the whole website and create a dummy HTML login page and probably get your credentials. Or basically I can do anything because I'm able to insert HTML in this application. The point I want to make here is just by recognizing patterns and creating heuristics like this, you can be a better tester. So it's always good to learn about other heuristics and also develop your own heuristics. Does this always work? This may work or may not work, but this is something that is worth trying. Here are some examples of this working in different websites. But the point is, these are some of the things that are worth trying. When you feel that there is a symptom of XSS, you can try this heuristic and see if your application is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. So when I clicked, in this palindrome exercise, when I did not enter any input and clicked on submit, and we saw this output, how did we decide that this is a bug? We did not have any requirement documents that told us that this is a bug. Similarly, when I entered an emoji and observed this behavior, how did we conclude that this is a bug? Most of us might advocate that we should always have requirement documents to test. But let's face the reality, we never have something called requirement documents. Most of the features, legacy features, do not have requirements. Even if there are requirements, they are not complete. And nobody specifies implicit requirements like this. Basically, the mechanism or principle by which you recognize a problem is what we call as oracles. Oracles basically tell you if a test that you performed passed or failed. Why does this matter? This matters because when working in an agile environment, you need to use heuristics to come up with quick test ideas and oracles to actually identify if the thing that you have discovered is actually a bug. How do you actually recognize that this is a bug? It might be because of your previous experiences with similar applications or because of some of the standards that you are aware of, right? This is what we call as oracles. Again, oracles may also fail. Sometimes you might have observed that you feel that a particular behavior is a bug, but it ends up to be a feature. Even oracles can fail, but this is something that will tell you if your output is what is expected or not. So there is a good write-up by Michael Bolton about oracles. I have dropped the link here. Feel free to read more about oracles. A couple of years back, I read the 7 principles of software testing, and I wanted to remember them for a long time. But I always had issues in remembering all 7 principles. So what did I do? I actually created a mnemonic. A mnemonic is basically a memory aid, like an acronym, which helps you to remember long lists and commonly grouped information. I created a mnemonic called Deep Cap, which helped me to remember all 7 principles easily. Just by remembering Deep Cap, I remember all 7 principles. This is basically a memory technique. So how are mnemonics and heuristics connected? If you look at all the popular heuristics contributed by the testing community, all of them are represented using mnemonics so that you can remember them and also recall them easily so that you can use them in your day-to-day software testing. I hope all of us got how heuristics and mnemonics are connected. Now that we learned a lot about heuristics, I want to put our heuristics to use. I want you guys to answer these two questions instantly. What caused the most death in the United States this year? Was it COVID-19 or was it heart disease? Who is more likely to be a wrestler, John or Jim? I'll give you 5 seconds. Think about it in your mind. All right. So most of us would have predicted that COVID-19 has caused the most deaths in the United States this year. And also, John is probably a wrestler. Why did we do this mistake? Heuristics help us to speeden up our decision making. But unfortunately, we also use heuristics to classify and categorize people. No matter how, no matter how smart you are, no matter from what background you come or how well educated you are, all of us have biases. There are 188 known biases in existence, and definitely all of us have some of them within us. And these biases will make you do wrong decisions. Okay? For example, in this case, why did we think that John is a wrestler? Because we have a prototype or a stereotype of a wrestler in our mind, and John fit that stereotype perfectly well. That's why we ended up thinking that John is a wrestler, right? So making decisions based on representativeness is what we call as representativeness bias. This happens in software testing also. In software testing, we have so many negative stereotypes about testers, right? Many people think that testers cannot code, testers are not technical enough, testers do not understand the underlying technology, testing is easy, anybody can test. So many negative stereotypes around testers. So how do you overcome this? Is by building credibility as a tester. So it's not true that not all testers can code. These days everyone can code. Everybody understands the underlying technology, right? Testers are doing a great job in agile and DevOps work. So basically, we need to build our credibility as a tester so that we can break these stereotypes. Similarly, why did we think that COVID-19 caused the most deaths in the United States? This is called as an availability bias, making decisions based on the readily available examples in our mind. We have the examples of COVID-19 causing deaths in our mind, thanks to the media, and we have not heard about heart disease causing deaths. So we ended up thinking that COVID-19 might have caused more deaths in the United States. The same thing might happen in software testing. Let's assume that you had a release a couple of months back, and there were few issues that were leaked to production. It might be because of any reason. But because of this, your upper management and your teammates may start saying that these days QA is not being done properly and there are a lot of issues leaked to production. It might not be true. It might only because they have some readily available examples in their mind that they are thinking that way. They might be, a victim of availability bias. How do you beat this? As testers, we need to be data driven, right? Always have quality metrics, right? Record everything that adds value to you, right? And when people talk some nonsense about, QA, you can basically shut them up by showing the metrics that you are collecting. So always, it's important to be data driven. Heuristics and biases have always been used against us throughout the history, especially in politics. If you look at this Nazi propaganda and the voting ballot that was designed by Hitler, in 1938, when Germany annexed Austria and they wanted to unite Austria with Germany, there was an election process item. And if you look at the yes circle is a lot bigger than the no circle. And we subconsciously attribute more value to the yes circle and we are drawn towards voting to yes. And in that election, actually Hitler won with a huge majority. It was not just because of the design. Of course, the calculation of the voting process was totally rigged and manipulated. That's a different story. But the point I want to make is, throughout the history, our heuristics and biases are used against us. In our day-to-day lives, marketers use something called as anchoring bias against us. We have this habit of attributing too much value to the first offered information. For example, if you go to an e-commerce site, the first offered information acts as an anchor and influences your decision making. For example, here, the first piece of information offered to you is the original price of this product. This acts as an anchor and makes you think that you are getting a good bargain, right? So this acts as an anchor and influences to buy your product by creating an illusion that you're getting a good discount. Similarly, if you look at many SaaS products, right, their pricing pages, many SaaS products list their most expensive plans first, so that this can act as an anchor and make you buy the standard plan, which seems more affordable. The same thing happens with monthly and annual pricing pages as well. This may happen in software testing also. I'll give you an example. Let's assume that we are doing a sprint planning meeting and my product manager asks me, hey Prashant, we need to test this feature A. How much time do you think it takes to test feature A? And he also adds, I think it takes only 8 hours. What do you think? So that information that he gave me, 8 hours, acts as an anchor and might influence me in my decision making. I might end up saying a estimate which is close to 8 hours. I might say, okay, product manager, it takes 9 hours. But if he hadn't given me that value, I might be more objective in thinking and I might have given a more accurate value. This might end up, being a problem later, and this might also, create inaccurate estimates and delays in the releases and all that, right? So we need to be aware of the anchoring bias. I will close the presentation in the next 5 minutes, but I want to quickly walk through 6 interesting biases and how it affects software testing. The first one is called as the gambler's fallacy. Every time I toss a coin, what's the likelihood that I will get ahead? I have 50% chances of getting ahead or 50% chances of getting a tail. Does it matter what happened in the previous flip? It does not matter, right? But we have this tendency of, getting influenced by the previous flips. If I get tails 3 times in a row, back to back, I might get influenced and I might feel that, okay, since I got tails 3 times, the next flip should be ahead. But the current flip does not depend on what happened in the previous flips. So this is what is called as gambler's fallacy. Many gamblers lose a lot of money in casinos and other places because of this bias that they have. This bias can also cause illusions in testing and make us feel that there are some patterns which are not actually existent. For example, we recently thought that there might be some relationship between the number of releases we make and the number of bugs that come up. And our metrics to some extent, supported the same. But when we dig deep, we realize that all the issues that we are getting were legacy issues. They had nothing to do with the releases that we make. But we got fooled and we thought that there is a pattern between releases and bugs, right? So this is a very scary bias, so be careful about this. The next one, I would say, is the most dangerous, especially for testers. It's called as premature closure. So we have this tendency of coming to a decision too early before we complete the investigation. For example, recently we had a new sign-up page, and in the new sign-up page, the set password field asked you to mandatorily enter any one of these characters, special characters. So one of our testers noticed that the set password field does not work with @ and hash. And he ended up reporting a bug saying that the set password field does not work with any special character. And later the developer tested with an exclamatory mark. It worked for the developer, and the developer said that is an invalid bug. But later when we dig deep, we got to know that only a particular set of special characters did not work. But think about the credibility, right? The tester might lose credibility if he becomes a victim of this bias and reports incorrect or invalid bugs. The next one is bandwagon effect. I think everyone can relate, right? This is basically doing something because everyone else is doing it. For example, Everyone is learning Java. Let me also learn Java. Everyone is using Selenium to automate UI. Let me also do the same. Basically becoming biased by what others are doing and doing it just because they are doing it. Right? We have also seen that when many people choose their study streams, right? Many people choose engineering only because their neighbors did it, their friends did it, or their seniors did it. Right? That's what is called as a bandwagon effect. The next one is called similarity bias. This can help. This can actually cause problems in hiring. Let's say I am a hiring manager and I want to hire a QA. So we have this tendency of surrounding ourselves with people who are similar to us, who think like us, or who behave like us, who look like us. That's what is called as a similarity bias. So as a hiring manager, I might end up hiring someone in whom I see a part of myself. Right? This can be a problem because if I end up hiring everyone who thinks just like me, there will be no perspectives in my team. We all know that diversity is the mother of innovation. So only when you have a diverse team, you will have more opportunities, you will have more opinions, right? You'll have a lot of growth opportunities only when you have a diverse team. So hiring managers need to be really careful. They should be aware of this bias and they should be open to the thoughts that actually do not match what they think. Right? So basically, the hiring managers need to be open and also understand this bias so that they don't end up hiring everyone who thinks similar to them. The next one is called confirmation bias. I think most of us would have noticed this. Uh, we basically have opinions, and in order to justify our opinions, we end up subconsciously finding evidences that proves that whatever we think is right. For example, I have two developers in my team, Jim and John. I feel that Jim is an excellent coder, and I feel that John is terrible, and John introduces a lot of bugs. In order to support my claim, I will subconsciously end up testing a lot of John's code, and I might also find some bugs in his code, and then I will, say that yes, I was right. John is a terrible coder. But in this process, I may end up neglecting Jim's code, and that might lead to issues later. This is what is called as confirmation bias. The last one that I want to talk today is called as authoritative bias. This is basically the tendency wherein we say the boss is always right. Right? We just agree to whatever our authorities say without doing much thought process or without thinking much. For example, let's say my engineering manager says me that, hey Prashant, let's release this feature without testing. Developers have already tested this, and we can take this to production. Okay, if I'm the victim of this authoritative bias, I will say, okay, sir, let's take this to production. Later, I may see a bug in production. Right? So I'm not saying that you should dismiss all the claims or expertise of your leaders or your bosses. The thing I want to say here is that you need to trust your leaders, but as testers, we need to ask questions. That for me, that is the biggest plus point for a tester, is to ask questions. Ask a lot of questions, and do not agree to something blindly only because your authorities said it. Finally, if heuristics lead to a lot of biases, and biases make us do erroneous decisions, why do we even need heuristics? As I told you earlier, every day we make thousands of decisions. So life would be exhaustive if we had to think deeply about every decision or choice we made. And for most of the human history, we have survived only because of our ability to think fast, our ability to make quick decisions when there is no enough time to think logically all possible things that you can do to solve a problem. Speaking about biases, most of us have biases and we cannot avoid it to a large extent. The best way to avoid biases is by studying biases. When you read more about biases, we become aware of them and we can manage them to some extent. And also, diversity to some extent can reduce biases. Having initiatives like peer testing, uh, mobbing, or group brainstorming, bug bashes, all this will give you perspectives so that you do not become too biased, and this basically helps you to fight biases. So always have diversity and fresh pair of eyes look into your product. With that, I will conclude my presentation. I have left some more resources for you to read more about heuristics. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Please connect with me on social media. I would be really happy to talk to you about this topic or any topic in software testing. With that, we can go for questions. Over to you, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prashant. That was a great presentation. So as of right now, I don't have any questions. I'm gonna open up the Q&A portal for everybody. Feel free to submit, and yeah. But yeah, that was really good. And Prashant, do you want, you have your blog guide to mobile testing?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's good. Here we go. We have one. Do you see the Q&A? So going by your example, my product manager tells me, I guess this feature A needs 8 hours to be tested. What do you think? If someone, maybe a QA or another, is asked in the same way, how should one not get biased via these and find an objective way and yet not make the project manager get frustrated by your choice?
Okay. So yes, I mean, you need to understand how to manage your stakeholders. That's the first part. Second part is, of course, you can always say that you look at to the requirements, and later, based on the split and based on how much effort it takes. The point here is you need to make the decision based on the requirement documents, how much effort it takes in testing, rather than what your product manager thinks, right? That's the thing that I'm trying to stress here.
So
I hope I answered this question. Madhurja.
okay. Any other questions? Prashant, I noticed your hair is different. Is that the COVID-19 hair?
Yes, that's the corona effect, yes.
Yeah. If you guys see that, I'm actually clean shaven. I always shaved my head, but my beard actually had it pretty long too. It was like over 2 inches long. And, so for me, I live in Las Vegas, and they finally just opened up the whole city. So that was that was the ending of the beard. So once Burlington and Ross opened up, I was able to buy some trimmers for that. So. Okay. Any other questions before we close off? If nothing, feel free to continue to add to the chat box or even to the Q&A portal. Actually, let me see. There is one from an anonymous attendee on the very bottom. I am not sure if this is related, but I am just having 1 year experience in testing. Any piece of advice?
Okay, so I don't know like what area to focus on. So all I can tell you is I talked about so many heuristics today. So as a tester, with minimal experience, start following some of the influential testers in the industry, right? So that you can get perspectives from them, so that you can learn heuristics from them. And also, since now you are aware of bias, make sure that you don't become a victim of any of these biases that we discussed today. And also try to be as technical as possible, right? Because people, as I told you, have a lot of negative stereotypes about testers. But I think we can break those stereotypes. The most important thing for a QA is to establish credibility, right? When you start doing that, I think there is no stopping you.
Yeah, you said community, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's good that whoever you are, so anonymous attendee, you're already on the right steps. You've joined this QA Touch community, and join other communities as well. Especially in areas that you're looking to grow in whatever career, or even for some of the hobbies that you do, or anything to really grow as a person. So you're already on the right step, and maybe in 5 years or a couple of years, ask that question again and continue to evolve for yourself. So thanks for that question, anonymous. Well, Prashant, that was
More
a.
anonymous.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I said we have more anonymous attendees asking questions.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. Any mnemonics for handling test team, especially when the team is loaded with tasks with end of sprint coming near? Thank you.
Yes. So there is a heuristic called as RCRCRC, which is very interesting. It talks about regression testing and how you can actually strategize your regression testing. So feel free to read about RCRCRC, which is testing mnemonic, which speaks about how to manage your regression testing, because many times QA are having a lot of pain points when they have to do regression again and again, especially when you do not have a lot of automation in place. So I would like you to read more about regression testing heuristic.
Great advice. It looks like the very last question we have from anonymous again. Hey, Prashant, thanks for giving us so much on biases, but it is also possible to be biased about biases. How do you identify situations of such sort?
So this bias is actually called as blind spot bias, feeling that I might have a feeling that I am not biased, right? So that feeling is called as blind spot bias. So we need to accept that everyone has biases. As I told you earlier, it's all about managing your biases, doing more reading about biases, and practicing not to be biased. So there is one more bias called as blind spot bias, which feels that that feeling that everyone has, that hey, I am not biased. I'm always data driven, or I go by the facts. But the fact is, everyone has bias.
No, that's great, especially in these times right now, where a lot of hate and bias going on too. You definitely need to see both sides of the story, right? One analogy I always talk about is, if we're on a table, we're sitting across each other, like as if we're playing checkers or chess. If the number looks like a 6 to me, you're gonna say that it looks like a 9, but who's right? There's really two sides. It's not just two sides to the story and two sides to the coin, but there's different perspectives. So, I liked how in your presentation talked about to see different perspectives, maybe a fresh set of eyes or from a different department. They're able to possibly see the problems or the issues when it was in front of you the whole time and you weren't even able to see it. So it's good to see different perspectives, right?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Prashant. That was a great presentation. Again, we're going to share this with everybody. Once the video is uploaded and, we do some editing, we'll share this with the whole community. So thank you so much, guys, for hanging in there and really being a part of the QA Touch virtual series. So if you guys want to share anything, I actually wrote it wrong, but the QA Touch _learning, that's actually the official hashtag. If you want to share any of this on social media, and definitely looking forward to the next event. So as a reminder, tomorrow we do have our DCCAP e-sessions with Moody Price. So this is going to be a website walkthrough and just some explanations from one of our clients, Moody Price. They're based out of the Louisiana area. Hopefully they're doing okay right now. There's a hurricane going on, so I'm gonna reach out to them after this, just make sure that they're okay and they're ready to go. But it's going to be a great session on Magento 2 Commerce Edition with ERP, Epicore's P21 integration. So, you guys are more than welcome to come attend and register for that. So it's dccap.com/e-sessions, and you'll be able to register. And this is a free event, so you guys feel free to register. Hopefully, we'll see you guys tomorrow, and then. Just a reminder, so our next QA Touch virtual series, the third one, will be on July 13th. So mark your calendars. Right now, we're still coming up with a couple of speakers for that. So just stay tuned for that. But other than that, you guys, sorry we went over about 4 minutes, but enjoy the rest of your day if you're in the US, and have a good night if you're in the India area. Thank you guys so much for attending the QA Touch virtual series. You guys have a good one, okay? Stay safe out there.